welcome to the channel. Imagine being quietly pushed aside, not because of what you did, but because of what others assume about you. What would you do if your dignity was questioned in the most unexpected place? Today's story reveals how one woman's calm courage exposed a hidden injustice and sparked a powerful movement for change. If you're ready to hear a story that will challenge what you think about power, silence, and standing up, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share stories that matter and build a community of awareness and action. For everyone who likes and subscribes, I want to say a prayer of goodness over you. May you be blessed with good health, may ease come into every part of your life, may freedom from debt find you, and may solutions to your difficulties unfold. For those who are sick or struggling, may healing and peace be with you. Your kindness and engagement mean more than you know. Please take a moment after the video to leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your own experiences, or simply what moved you most. We want to hear from you. Now let's begin. Rain dotted the window in slow, deliberate beats, soft against the reinforced glass of LaGuardia's Gate C4. It was just past 6:15 in the evening, and the boarding process for Flight 482 to Los Angeles was already underway. Passengers trickled in with rolling bags and slouched shoulders, pulling jackets tighter against the late March chill that never quite left the city. At the front of the boarding line, a woman stood quietly, ticket in hand, her phone face down in her coat pocket. Her name was Talia Griffin. At 38, she was the founder and former CEO of Verity, a data analytics company she built from her kitchen counter to a 9-figure acquisition. She'd sold the company a year earlier, stepped back from the tech world, and taken a different kind of pace. She didn't wear status like a badge. No logos, no entourage. Just a neat camel coat, pressed slacks, and a pair of old but polished ankle boots. The boarding agent called her group first class. Talia stepped forward, offered a quick smile, and scanned her pass. The agent barely glanced at her before waving her through with a distracted nod. Inside the jet bridge, the hum of the aircraft filled the tight air. Row 2A. Window seat. She placed her bag in the overhead compartment, sat down, and exhaled. The seat was soft leather, warm from the cabin's residual heat. A flight attendant passed her a bottle of water without a word. Talia took it, nodded, and settled in. 3 minutes later, a man approached. Tall, broad, white, in a navy windbreaker. The kind of man who moved like he always had somewhere better to be. He paused at 2A, stared at Talia, then glanced down at his boarding pass. A frown pulled at the corner of his mouth. Without a word, he turned and headed back up the aisle. Talia thought nothing of it, until a second flight attendant came over. "I'm so sorry," the woman said, smiling with the careful tone of someone practiced in customer service, "but we have a bit of a mix-up. Would you mind switching seats to 24C in Economy Plus? Just for this flight." Talia blinked once. "No," she said calmly. "I purchased this seat. It was confirmed. I understand, and we're terribly sorry. But we've had a last-minute upgrade and we're asking for your cooperation." "An upgrade?" Talia repeated. "But not for me." The flight attendant's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked to the aisle. "It's just a small favor. It won't affect your travel time." Talia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Please bring the flight supervisor." That's when the air began to change. One passenger looked up. Another paused mid-swipe on their phone. A ripple, subtle but growing, began to stir. The supervisor arrived. He was younger than expected. Nervous, tapping his iPad with too many swipes. "Miss Griffin," he said quickly, "we've had a reassignment. We deeply apologize, but we need to accommodate a loyalty member with priority boarding status." Talia raised one eyebrow. "I'm not just a loyalty member. I'm a full-fare first-class ticket holder." The man hesitated. "Yes, but there's a seniority algorithm that occasionally prioritizes upgrades for our elite-tier flyers." She didn't blink. "And that man," she said, gesturing discreetly to the passenger who had earlier stopped at her row, now watching from a few feet away, "is one of them?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then tell me why the black woman gets asked to move." The silence arrived like thunder. The flight crew froze. The man in the windbreaker looked away. Talia didn't say another word. Instead, she reached up, retrieved her bag, and stood. People watched her now. Not everyone. Just enough. She made her way down the aisle, past rows of surprised faces, until she reached seat 24C. She sat. She didn't argue further. Didn't record it. Didn't even sigh. But someone else did. 2 rows up, a teenager with thick glasses and an old Canon camera in his lap had seen the whole thing. He tapped his phone. Sent a message. Then another. 20 minutes later, while Flight 482 was still taxiing toward the runway, a tweet surfaced. Black woman bumped from first class so a white man could take her seat. Airline says it was a loyalty upgrade. She didn't even raise her voice. No names. No photos. Just words. But in the digital world, words were enough. And within the hour, that quiet moment in row 2A began to echo far beyond LaGuardia. Far beyond the aisle. Far beyond the cabin. A ripple had started. And it wasn't done moving yet. Midtown Manhattan shimmered under cold, yellow streetlights as traffic pulsed through the arteries of the city. Inside a glass tower on Lexington Avenue, the headquarters of Ether Air was quiet but not asleep. At 8:47 p.m., the floor that housed the Public Affairs Division was lit up like daylight. Aaron Lovell, Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy, had just returned from a fundraiser uptown when his phone vibrated 3 times in rapid succession. He glanced down. 3 missed calls. 1 from internal security, 1 from the social media escalation team, and 1 from Madeline Shore, Senior Director of Brand Integrity. Before he could unlock his screen, Madeline called again. "Aaron," she said, her voice taut. "We've got an issue." "What kind?" "Potential viral. In-flight incident. First class downgrade. Passenger bumped for another. Claims of racial bias." Aaron walked faster toward his office, coat still on. "Who's the passenger?" No name in the tweet, but people are connecting dots. A couple replies mentioned Talia Griffin. He stopped walking. "Talia Griffin?" "Yes. Founder of Verity. Sold to Synectic last year. Net worth estimated around 175 mil. You're telling me we downgraded a tech mogul mid-boarding?" "She was in 2A. Flight 482 to LAX. Switched to 24C. The other passenger is Robert Ennis. Diamond tier. Venture partner at Foldstone." Aaron shut his door. "Do we have video?" "Not yet. But we have witness posts. One from someone on board, another tagged our handle directly. I flagged legal and comms." "What's the story on Ennis?" "White. 49. Multiple upgrades logged on his profile. No issues in the past. But this looks bad, Aaron. Real bad." Aaron moved to the window, staring out over the East River. "Has anyone contacted Griffin?" "We're still trying. Her assistant posted something vague on LinkedIn. No names, but the implication is strong. It's already getting traction." Aaron paced. "I want full manifests, crew logs, boarding camera footage. I want to know who gave the order and why protocol didn't catch it." Madeline didn't miss a beat. "Already requested. But Aaron, this can't be handled quietly." "I know that," he said low. "We're past that now." Downstairs, in a different wing of the building, a room filled with silent screens showed every active flight, every flagged social post, every mention of Ether Air across public networks. Red alerts blinked next to Flight 482. Media monitoring had begun. Hashtags were forming. Meanwhile, back in the sky, Talia stared at the seat back in front of her. The man in 24B offered a hesitant smile. She didn't return it. Not out of rudeness but clarity. She hadn't come to this seat by mistake. She'd been moved here, and the reasons were no mystery. Somewhere behind her, 2A was now reclined, glass in hand. The man in the windbreaker didn't even know what he'd walked into. And he wouldn't until someone told him. When the flight landed at LAX just after 11 p.m. local time, the air inside the plane was thick with the quiet kind of tension. Talia waited, unmoving, until the rows ahead cleared. The man in 2A had already disembarked. As she stepped off the plane, 2 men in tailored navy jackets stood near the jet bridge. They carried no luggage. No badges. "Ms. Griffin?" one of them asked. "Yes. I'm Julian McCree with Ether Air Executive Services. This is my colleague Ezra Devine. We've been asked to escort you to the private lounge." Talia didn't blink. "Why?" "The chief operating officer is waiting. He would like to speak with you in person." She looked at them both, then stepped forward. "Then let's go." They moved swiftly through the terminal. Heads turned. Someone whispered. One woman paused and pulled out her phone. A flash went off quietly. In the world of media narratives, stories didn't wait for confirmation. They unfolded in real time. Inside the lounge, warm lights softened the marble fixtures. Leather chairs lined the walls. Bottles of mineral water on every table. At the center of the room stood the man in charge. Silas Keene, Chief Operating Officer of Ether Air. Gray at the temples. Tailored wool. Sleepless eyes. "Talia," he said, stepping forward. "Thank you for coming." She didn't take his hand. "I'd like to begin with a personal apology," he said. On behalf of Ether Air and on behalf of myself. What happened to you never should have happened. She nodded once. And yet it did. Silas glanced at the security team, who stepped back out of earshot. He lowered his voice. We've already grounded the crew involved. There's a formal review underway. The supervisor and both attendants have been suspended. That fast? Talia asked, her voice even. You were removed from a confirmed first-class seat by a crew that didn't follow policy and made assumptions that never should have factored into seating protocol. And if I weren't who I am, she asked, would I even be getting this apology? Silas didn't answer immediately. She shook her head. I'm not here for spin. I've spent 12 years in rooms like this, building systems that didn't recognize me until I was impossible to ignore. We'd like your help, Silas said finally. No NDAs. No backroom deals. We want you on our executive ethics review board. We need perspective. Real accountability. A voice that sees what we haven't. Talia stared at him. Then she said, I'm not your cleanup crew. He opened his mouth, but she continued. But I will stand on your next summit stage. I will speak about what happened. Not just to me. To others. To people who are moved, erased, silenced. Not for metrics. For clarity. Silas nodded. Understood. And after that, she added, we'll see if you're still serious about change. She turned, picked up her bag, and walked out. A quiet woman, now carrying a story too loud to ignore. By morning, New York was no longer waking to its usual rhythm of honking cabs and distant subway clatter. It was waking to a headline. Not a scream, but a steady current, cutting through inboxes and timelines like cold wind through steel. Black tech founder downgraded from first class. Ether Air faces scrutiny. No name was mentioned in the earliest posts, but the algorithm knew better. Facial recognition, past interviews, speaking events, keynote photos. Her presence was already a matter of public record. Within hours, the story began evolving. Not from rumor, but from confirmation. Not from clickbait, but from eyewitness accounts. The first video came from Seat 26A. A grainy 30-second clip. Talia Griffin, calm and silent, standing beside a uniformed crew member who offered no explanation beyond a tight-lipped, we'll find you another seat. The clip didn't show the man in 2A. It didn't need to. The impact wasn't in the visuals, but in the silence. In the way no one intervened. In the way a dozen eyes watched but stayed still. The clip went viral in under 3 hours. At a co-working space in Soho, a software engineer named Karina watched it unfold over coffee. She remembered Talia from a tech panel 2 years ago. Had taken notes on her story. Had bookmarked a quote that stuck with her. Power isn't who speaks the loudest. It's who doesn't have to raise their voice to be heard. By noon, Karina had retweeted the video with a single caption. She said nothing. And still, the whole cabin heard her. It gained 30,000 likes in 2 hours. Inside Ether Air's Midtown headquarters, the mood was electric and nervous. PR war rooms had been spun up. Meeting rooms converted into impromptu strategy bays. Legal, ethics, communications. All hands. The floor felt like a newsroom under siege. In the center of it all stood Aaron Lovell, clutching a tablet, his jaw tight as he read the latest media rundown. Morning show just bumped our statement from C block to the lead, said Madeline, standing nearby with a coffee she hadn't touched. Aaron exhaled. Any response from Talia's team? Not direct. But her verified account just posted the article from the Ledger. No comment. Just the link. That said more than a statement ever could. The internal Slack channels were worse. Hundreds of employees demanding answers. Asking why the same company that boasted diversity in every earnings call had a crew who couldn't distinguish between protocol and bias. Silas Keene stood at the front of the executive briefing room, arms folded, eyes locked on the conference screen as headlines flashed by. We're not containing this, said Aaron. We're not supposed to, Silas replied. We're supposed to learn from it. Out loud. That afternoon, Silas made the call to accelerate the summit. Originally scheduled for the end of the quarter, the leadership gathering would now happen in 10 days. And Talia's keynote would remain. No edits. No review. Her words, her truth, Silas said. If we're asking her to speak, we don't get to shape the story. At a cafe in Brooklyn's Prospect Heights, Talia sat across from her longtime friend and advisor, Imara. You really gonna go up there and speak to them? Imara asked, stirring her tea. Talia nodded. They offered a seat at the table. And? I don't need their table. I just need the mic. Imara smiled. You know people are watching you now. Like really watching. They always were, Talia replied. They just didn't know what they were seeing. At a corner table nearby, a young black woman pretended not to listen, but her ears caught every word. She had seen the video that morning on her phone, had watched it twice, not for drama but for the power behind the quiet. Talia didn't know she was there. She didn't know about the editor at City Pulse preparing an in-depth feature, or the corporate trainer rewriting her entire onboarding manual with Talia's story as the first case study. She didn't know about the group of business school students at Columbia preparing a panel on implicit bias using her flight as a case. She didn't need to. The story had taken flight. Not because she wanted it to, but because silence had finally failed. And when silence fails, the truth speaks louder than any press release. That night, Talia wrote her remarks. Not a speech. A story. No bullet points. No slogans. Just a memory. A moment. A mirror. And she would hold it up not to shame, but to reveal. Not to hurt, but to insist on honesty. Because every system thinks it's fair until someone shows it what harm looks like in daylight. And now daylight had come. 10 days passed, not quietly but with the hum of anticipation threaded through every corridor of power, every boardroom, every break room where someone had once been told to wait, to explain, to prove. New York never paused, but it watched, and when the day of the Ether Air Leadership Summit arrived, it was watching more closely than ever before. The venue was a towering conference center on the west side of Manhattan, polished glass stretching skyward like ambition crystallized. Security was tight, the guest list tighter. Press badges had been denied across the board. No cameras, no feeds. What would be said on that stage would stay in the room. Except everyone knew it wouldn't. Inside the main auditorium, 400 of the most senior leaders from Ether Air, Altara, and its portfolio partners took their seats in sleek rows. Chief technology officers, regional vice presidents, board members, and advisors filed in with lanyards around their necks and phones tucked away. They knew the schedule. They had read the prep packets. But it wasn't the company's roadmap or quarterly innovation plans they were murmuring about. It was Talia Griffin. Backstage, Talia stood with her notes in her hand, though she hadn't looked at them in over an hour. She wore navy blue, not black, not red. Solid, assured, understated. She had chosen not to rehearse. Not in front of mirrors, not in front of friends. This wasn't a performance. Aaron Lovell greeted her with a nod. We're ready when you are. She nodded once. Let's begin. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight traced the stage. There was no fanfare, no introduction music, no list of accolades. Just her name on the screen in white against a midnight blue backdrop. Talia Griffin, founder, Lantera Systems. She stepped into the light. The applause that met her wasn't thunderous. It was thoughtful. Collected. She began with no slide, no graphic, no opening joke. She began with a moment. I boarded Flight 802 on a Tuesday. I had a confirmed seat in first class. I had cleared every checkpoint, every verification. I had flown with the airline before. I had done nothing out of place, except, it seems, exist in the wrong frame of someone else's assumptions. The room stilled. She didn't raise her voice. I was asked to move without explanation. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't demand. I moved. I took my new seat. And for the rest of the flight, no one spoke to me. She paused, letting the weight fall gently but surely over the silence. What happened that day was not a glitch. It was not an oversight. It was the result of a system trained to doubt me before it even knows me. Not just me, anyone who doesn't fit the mold that power tends to recognize. A ripple moved through the rows. Some leaned forward. Some sat straighter. I wasn't angry that day. I was tired. Tired of walking into rooms where I'm an anomaly. Tired of proving my worth after I've already proven it. Tired of being seen only after someone reads my bio, not before. She told the story in measured detail. Not just of the flight, but of the days that followed. The emails. The silence. The cautious statements. The frantic damage control. And then the invitation. This summit, this opportunity to speak, it isn't a favor. It's overdue accountability. But I accept it because I believe silence helps no one. And because too many of us stay silent for too long. Talia moved to the edge of the stage, looking directly into the crowd. You work in systems. You build them. Govern them. Shape the way millions of people move, get hired, are promoted, are seen. Some of you are proud of the diversity stats in your reports. Some of you think equity is a checklist. I'm here to tell you, it's none of that. She lowered her voice, but it carried further. Equity is what happens when no one has to ask if they belong. When policies are written not just to protect the brand but to protect people. When assumptions are questioned before harm is done, not after. When we stop waiting for someone else to speak up. Pause. You don't have to intend harm to cause it. But once you see the harm, your response is your legacy. And with that, she stepped back. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your applause. I want change. In how you hire. In how you train. In who gets promoted. In who gets believed. Then she said the line that would later be quoted in profiles, printed on posters, and posted in team rooms across industries. Power that listens is the only kind worth keeping. The applause rose slowly, not rushed, not choreographed, but built from the ground up. First a handful of hands, then a wave. Not just of appreciation, but of recognition. The sound of people hearing what they hadn't heard before. Or finally understanding what had always been there. Backstage, Silas Keene turned to Aaron. She just gave us the roadmap, he said. Aaron nodded. Now we follow it. Or we step aside. Talia walked off the stage without looking back. Not because she didn't care about the reaction, but because she didn't need it to validate the truth. She had spoken, and the room had heard her. The day after the summit, New York hummed with the usual rhythm of urgency. Subways screeched beneath grid streets, office towers filled and emptied like tides, and news tickers blinked across skyscraper facades without pause. But beneath the motion, something had shifted. Inside Etherair's headquarters near Bryant Park, a quiet tension lingered in the open-plan office floors. Employees who had watched the live stream replay on internal portals moved differently. Some paused before speaking in meetings. Others spoke with new clarity. The most telling change was the conversations happening in spaces where, until recently, silence had ruled. In the employee cafeteria, two young engineers from the design division sat across from one another, their laptops open, half-eaten breakfast wraps pushed aside. She said it like she lived it every day, one murmured. She probably has, the other replied. We've all seen it. But no one ever had the mic before. Upstairs, in the executive wing, the air was less reflective and more reactive. Silas Keene stood at the head of the long conference table, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows. The senior team sat around him, some with their arms crossed, others with notepads open but untouched. We are not here to patch a headline, Silas said. We are here to restructure the way we operate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every executive in the room had seen Talia's address. Every one of them had heard the quiet condemnation stitched into each word. Effective immediately, we are freezing all frontline staffing decisions pending review. Every crew assignment protocol, every customer interaction policy. If it isn't clear, traceable, and equitable, it doesn't get used. A few glanced around, unsure whether this was a long-term declaration or a passing PR maneuver. Silas kept speaking. I've appointed a transition board. Full authority to audit every department's hiring and advancement process. Anyone who obstructs them will be stepping down. He paused, letting the threat of transparency sink in. And yes, he added, looking at his VP of People Strategy, Talia Griffin has been offered a standing seat on that board. Her decision is her own. But whether she joins us or not, her impact already has. At that moment, a knock interrupted. A communications director stepped in, tablet in hand. It's spreading, she said without apology. Wall Street Journal just picked up the story. They're running a series on implicit bias in corporate service culture. The Times is requesting an op-ed. They want Talia to write it. Silas nodded. Let them ask. Whether she writes it or not, we already owe her the credit. Across the city, Lanterra Systems headquarters remained calm. Talia's team knew better than to flood her with messages or celebration. They simply went about their work with new precision, knowing that their founder's silence had carried farther than 1,000 protests. But in smaller spaces, salons, subway platforms, shared apartments, the echo of her story began to multiply. A woman who worked retail in Queens leaned over the counter to whisper, "Did you hear what that tech CEO said?" Finally someone said it. A professor at NYU added her clip to a syllabus. A union rep from the Port Authority printed out quotes and taped them to the office bulletin board. Talia hadn't asked to become a symbol. She had resisted the spotlight her entire life. But now, without seeking it, she had become a mirror. One that reflected the systems people lived in every day, even when they pretended not to see. The following week, Lanterra's offices received a handwritten letter. No return address. Just 6 words on a single card, scrawled in neat cursive. You said it for all of us. Talia pinned it to the corner of her office whiteboard and said nothing. The moment had passed, but the message remained. And all around her, the city began to change, not in bold declarations or overnight reforms, but in small, quiet ways. An HR director reworded a job posting. A manager rethought how they handled complaints. A young black woman took her place in a conference room without hesitation, without apology. Not because the world had shifted overnight, but because someone had stood still long enough to be seen. 2 weeks after her speech, Talia Griffin stood at the back of a crowded auditorium in Midtown Manhattan, arms folded, wearing the same black coat she had worn the day of her return flight. This time she wasn't on stage. She had come to listen. The event was small, a local business equity forum hosted by a nonprofit she had once mentored. Most of the attendees didn't know she was in the room. She liked it that way. The spotlight had shifted elsewhere now, and that was exactly as it should be. On stage, a young founder spoke nervously about his struggles securing funding, about being taken seriously in rooms where he was the only one who looked like him. His voice wavered once, but he kept going. Talia watched his hands. They were steady. When he finished, the applause was genuine. Outside, New York moved as it always did, unbothered, impatient, towering. But for a few moments inside that auditorium, something felt slower, more deliberate. As she exited into the cold evening, a reporter stood near the corner, notepad in hand, clearly scanning for quotes. He spotted her, hesitated, then approached gently. "Miss Griffin, could I ask a quick?" She shook her head once, polite but firm. "I'm just here to listen." He nodded, lowered his notepad. "Of course. Just, thank you." Talia didn't reply. She walked toward the curb, her footsteps soft against the pavement. Back at her office the next day, Jamal was waiting outside her door with a cup of tea and a folder tucked under his arm. He handed both to her without comment. "What's this?" she asked, lifting the folder. "Letters," he said. "From our team. After your summit speech, I told them to write what it meant to them. Not for the press. Just for you." Talia set the tea down and opened the folder. The first page was simple. Handwritten, uneven letters addressed only to the woman who reminded me I belong. Each page after that told a different version of the same truth. A product manager who'd almost resigned after being passed over 3 times. A designer who had learned to lower her voice in meetings. An intern who never saw a black woman in leadership until Talia spoke. By the 10th letter, Talia stopped reading and leaned back in her chair. The weight wasn't overwhelming. It was grounding. Jamal stood nearby, uncertain whether to leave. She looked up. "These don't go in a press kit." "Of course not," he said. "They're not for the world. They're for you." She nodded and set the folder beside the note from the unknown passenger. The words were different. The meaning was the same. Later that week, Talia received a call from a quiet voice on the other end of the line. A woman from a national civil rights organization had tracked her down. Not for publicity, not for spectacle, but for an invitation. "We're building a coalition," the woman said. "Policy advisors, corporate leaders, community activists. We need someone who can bridge the world of commerce and conscience. Someone who's walked both." Talia didn't answer right away. She stared out the window, watching the rush of taxis on Madison Avenue. She could hear the weight behind the ask. It wasn't flattery. It was purpose. "When do we begin?" she asked. "Next month," the woman said. "But there's no rush. Take the time you need." Talia smiled faintly. "I've had enough time. Let's start." The call ended, and she sat in silence for a while longer, letting the city's ambient noise fill the space around her. The impact of that flight had long since cleared the news cycle. The names of the crew were no longer headlines. The man in the seat that triggered the entire unraveling remained nameless, faceless. That part didn't matter anymore. What remained was the shift. Not just in a company or a policy. An expectation. An attention. In what people now recognized as unacceptable, even if it came wrapped in soft voices and airline smiles. Talia didn't set out to change the world that day. But she had refused to be moved, and in doing so she had moved others. She picked up her tea, now lukewarm, and took a sip. Outside the day was clear. Cold but promising. Inside something had settled. And somewhere not far from her building, a young girl in a school uniform walked down the sidewalk with her mother, pointed at a billboard featuring Talia's company, and said, "That's her." Her mother smiled but said nothing. The girl didn't need an explanation. She already understood. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Talia Griffin's new office. The city hummed softly below, a steady rhythm of lives moving forward, plans being made, futures being built. But inside, the air was charged with a different kind of momentum. Today was the first meeting of the coalition she had agreed to join. A group of leaders and activists gathered around a long table, their faces reflecting determination, weariness, and hope. The work ahead was vast, complicated by history and resistance. But it was necessary. Talia sat at the head of the table, reviewing notes on a tablet. Her voice, calm and measured, carried authority without force. "We are not here to erase the past," she began. "We are here to acknowledge it, confront it, and ensure it does not dictate the future. Equity is not a trend or a program. It is a commitment. A constant." Heads nodded in agreement. The room was alive with ideas. Policies to rewrite, training programs to implement, metrics to track outcomes instead of intentions. They debated language, strategies, and stories, knowing that change required both data and humanity. Later, Talia stepped into a conference room where a team of young professionals awaited her guidance. They had heard about the airline incident and the summit speech. For many, she was proof that persistence mattered. One by one, they shared their own experiences of feeling unseen, unheard, undervalued. Talia listened without interruption, her presence a silent validation. Then she spoke. "Your voice is your power. Sometimes it feels like speaking up risks everything. But silence guarantees nothing changes. We don't have to shout to be heard. We have to be clear, consistent, and courageous." The weeks that followed were filled with workshops, policy drafts, and community conversations. Talia found herself invited to university lectures, business panels, and even city council hearings. Each time, she spoke not just from experience, but from conviction. On a chilly spring afternoon, she walked through a park near her office. Children played under blooming cherry trees. She paused to watch a group of teenagers painting a mural, a vibrant tapestry celebrating diversity and resilience. A young woman approached her, breathless and excited. "Miss Griffin? Amaya, your speech last month changed how I see my future. I want to start a nonprofit to help kids like me get scholarships. Will you help?" Talia smiled warmly. "Let's talk." In the quiet moments between meetings and speeches, Talia reflected on how far she had come. Not just from that flight or the headlines, but from every moment in her life when she was underestimated, overlooked, or sidelined. Change, she realized, was less about a single event and more about countless small acts of courage. The willingness to stand, to speak, to be seen, even when the world expected silence. Her phone buzzed with a new message, an invitation to consult with a Fortune 500 company on diversity training. She typed a quick reply. "Yes, let's get to work." As the sun set behind the skyscrapers, Talia Griffin looked out over the city she loved. Her journey was far from over. But now, the path was clearer, illuminated by the quiet strength of those who refused to be moved. 7 moral lessons drawn from this story. Moral lesson 1: the power of speaking up. In a world that often rewards silence, the courage to speak up can feel risky. Yet, silence protects power and allows injustice to grow unchecked. Talia's story shows us that even when the system seems overwhelming or indifferent, raising your voice can create ripples that grow into waves of change. Speaking up is not about confrontation for its own sake. It is about revealing truth, demanding respect, and creating visibility where invisibility once reigned. It reminds us that our words, when spoken with clarity and conviction, can become a beacon for those who feel unheard. Courage doesn't mean shouting louder than everyone else. Sometimes, it means being the calm, steady voice that refuses to be ignored. Moral lesson 2: the weight of assumptions. One of the story's hardest truths is how quickly assumptions can harm. Talia was not removed from her seat because of a mistake or accident. She was moved because of who others assumed she was. This reveals how deep biases can be hidden beneath everyday actions and decisions. We are reminded that assumptions, especially those based on appearance, background, or status, can cause damage far beyond the moment. They affect dignity, opportunity, and trust. It is a call to question our own judgments, to pause before we leap to conclusions about others, and to recognize the humanity beneath the surface. The story challenges us to confront the silent harm assumptions cause and to actively dismantle them wherever we find them. Moral lesson 3: accountability is more than apologies. Talia received an apology from the airline captain and later from corporate leaders. But the story teaches that apologies alone are insufficient if they are not accompanied by meaningful change. True accountability means owning the problem fully, examining how systems and policies allowed harm to occur, and taking concrete steps to fix those flaws. It requires transparency, willingness to be uncomfortable, and follow through beyond public relations statements. This lesson reminds us that accountability is a process, not a moment. It is about actions that restore trust and prevent future harm, not just words that soothe immediate discomfort. Moral lesson 4. Visibility changes the narrative. Throughout the story, Talia's quiet dignity and her refusal to be invisible shifted how people saw her and the situation. Visibility has the power to disrupt old narratives and create new ones. When people who have been marginalized step into the light, they challenge stereotypes and change perceptions. This lesson encourages us to value the power of presence, representation, and storytelling. It reminds us that who gets seen and how they are seen matters deeply. By creating space for diverse voices and experiences, we enrich understanding and foster empathy. The story shows that visibility is a form of resistance, an act of reclaiming power. Moral lesson 5. Change requires both individuals and systems. Talia's story makes clear that individual courage is necessary but not sufficient for lasting change. While one person's stand can ignite attention and inspire others, systemic transformation demands collective effort, policy shifts, and ongoing vigilance. The formation of the coalition, the policy reviews, and the new training programs all highlight the importance of working together within institutions to build equity. This lesson encourages us to balance personal action with engagement in broader structures. It reminds us that lasting progress often happens through slow, persistent work across many fronts, from boardrooms to community spaces, and that change is a shared responsibility. Moral lesson 6. Strength comes from quiet resolve. The story's protagonist is neither loud nor angry in the traditional sense. Her power comes from steady resolve, calm dignity, and unwavering focus. This teaches us that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet force that holds its ground without bitterness or spectacle. It reminds us that resilience is built over time, through persistence in the face of repeated challenges. Quiet strength can be just as transformative as bold action, especially when it sustains us through long battles. This lesson invites us to honor different forms of courage and to recognize that standing firm with grace is a powerful act of resistance. Moral lesson 7. Progress is a collective journey. Finally, the story underscores that progress is never a solo endeavor. Talia's journey from being wronged on a plane to speaking at summits and influencing corporate policy shows how interconnected our efforts are. It reveals the importance of allies, communities, and networks who listen, support, and act alongside those who face injustice. It reminds us that change happens when people come together with shared vision and purpose. This lesson encourages us to build bridges, mentor others, and create spaces where diverse voices contribute to shaping a fairer world. It is a call to move beyond individual success and invest in collective futures. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons, events, or organizations is purely coincidental. The purpose of this video is to provide moral lessons, motivation, inspiration, and meaningful learning for viewers. It is not intended to reflect or represent any actual situation or individual. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this story. I hope it opened your eyes to the power of speaking up and standing strong, even when the world tries to keep you quiet. Your time and attention mean a lot. If this story moved you or made you think, please consider exploring more videos on this channel. We share stories that inspire, challenge, and empower. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. And if you want, leave a comment below. Tell us what stood out to you or share your own experiences. We're building a community here and your voice matters. Until next time, take care and keep standing for what is right.